We actually started this conversation a little while back, and we were talking about this event today, and we were talking about how important it was for the impact of not only just the organization, the company, but she was really motivated to have you guys impacted. And it was, the conversation wasn't even like a lot of companies, they call me to come in and speak. A lot of them talk about the company. Her conversation was all about the employees, all about the leadership, all about the value to bring to you guys. So I think that's something very strong, and it says a lot about the company and what you guys have done, and each and every one of you. So one more time, please let's give Michelle a hand. Now, a lot of you guys may not know who I am, and that's okay. You know, I've played on enough teams where you'd probably get confused. So I played, like she said, I played with the Chicago Bulls. I started off with Michael Jordan. Everybody's heard of Michael Jordan before. Raise your hand, right? And had a great time with the Bulls and, you know, learned so much. I mean, can you imagine being on an organization with a guy that literally was considered the best in the world? And what's interesting about my relationship with Michael Jordan was I actually had a moment that I remembered why I even started to play basketball. Let me give you a little bit of insight of how that happened. I was sitting in the limousine with Michael Jordan. It was right after a preseason game in Sarasota, Florida. And I'm sitting there, and business as usual, we're conversating, and we were going back to the hotel. We still had our uniforms on, and we were going to shoot a quick commercial in the hotel. So we left the uniforms on, everything was great. It was after our preseason game. So I'm sitting there, and this kid runs up to the window. And the window is going up. And so the kid's like, Mr. Jordan, please, hold on a second. So he tells the limo driver to stop the window. So the window stops. And he looks in and he goes, can I please have your wristband? And at that moment, time stood still. And as Michael Jordan starts grabbing his wristband and he starts sliding it off of his arm, I went back. I went back to the little kid sitting in the 9th grade on my couch in my family room, looking at television and talking to my mother about what am I going to do? See, what you guys don't know is my father, which was 6'4", you know, about 260 pounds, former football player, right? He said, son, if you're going to stay in my house, you're going to have to play sports. Well, I was an artist, you know, raised in Heidelberg, Germany, didn't speak English to my, 8.5 years old, that I learned the hard way. And I was into the arts. And so my dad was saying, you gotta forget that. You need to play sports, right? So I went out for football, and let's just put it this way. It didn't go so well, right? It didn't go so well. I remember catching the ball, or trying to catch the ball. The quarterback called the play. I ran down the middle cut. I jumped really high, grabbed the ball. Oh my God, I got the ball, right? And as I'm coming down, I look to the left, and there's a guy coming with his helmet down. I go, oh my goodness, this is going to be something crazy. I look to the right to embrace for the impact, and there's another guy coming the other direction. And I'm saying to myself at this point, all right, Dad, how much do I really love you? Needless to say, I'm laying on the floor or on the field, and my shoes over there, my helmet's over there, I'm laying down in daylight seeing stars. And I said to myself, Dad, I love you, but no football. No football. So I'm sitting there talking to my mother, fast forward back, and we're talking about, she says, well, son, sports is great. She goes, what if you try something else, another sport? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm such a loser, I don't want to play football. My dad wants me to play football, and, I can't be a kicker. I'm like, those guys, nobody claps for those guys, right? I know that sucks, huh? And my mother turns on the television, and on the TV, on the television screen, it was Chicago Bulls playing. And there, running down the court gracefully, was this guy. And he was running, and the power you can feel on the screen. And he controlled the game. But me being an artist, I thought it was cool because he had a wristband on. So I'm looking, I'm like, oh, Mom, he's cool. Who's that guy? She goes, son, that's Michael Jordan. He's the greatest player. And I go, wow. And I go, I really like his wristband. And she looks at me and she goes, well, if you like his wristband, I'll get you one and you can try playing basketball. And I said, okay, if you get me a wristband, yeah, Mom, I'll try to play basketball. I'll go out and go for it. And so at that moment, my life changed. My life changed. Michael Jordan had no idea who I was, had no idea that I was sitting on a couch in Jackson, Mississippi, watching him. There's a saying that the commitment of one can change 1,000 lives. And in this case with Michael Jordan, it's turned into millions of lives. See, when I was sitting in that limousine, several years later, matter of fact, 8 years later, 7.5 to 8 years later is all it was, and I made it to the NBA. When I was sitting in that limousine, it all of a sudden came back to me that the commitment of one man striving for greatness didn't have to say a word to me or anything. It was just the impact that he did, that he created, that actually drove me. And from that point on, I made a choice. And I made a choice that I was going to change not only my life, but my family's life as well. And it was a commitment of an impact. So when Michael Jordan slid that wristband off of his arm, he goes by my face with it and he's reaching out to the kid. The kid grabs it. All of a sudden, boom, we're back into full motion here. And the kid says, oh, Mr. Jordan, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the wristband. I'm sitting there and I don't know what I was looking like. I don't know if I was pale at the time. I don't know if I looked like I saw a ghost. But Michael Jordan looks at me, he goes, Courtney, hey man, what's wrong with you? And I should, oh, I'm okay. No, nothing's wrong, right? And I remember that this man that I was sitting next to was the reason that I even picked up a basketball. A reason I even picked up a basketball. Until this day, some of the things that I learned, not only with the Chicago Bulls, but playing for one of the greatest coaches in Phil Jackson that ever coached the game, and playing alongside Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, all of those guys that played that year. Just completely blessed to be there. But some of those things that I learned, okay, still stay with me today. And because of the commitment of that one man at that point in time, that drove me to be on that team because I visualized the impact. I visualized my future. And 7.5 years later, I was standing on the court with Michael Jordan. Pretty impactful. So the message in that story is pretty simple. There are things that are going to happen in your life. There are things that happen every single day that you do, that you have no idea who you are impacting. You have no idea what's actually happening in someone else's world. Simple things, how you communicate to someone, how you smile at a customer, how you interact with your employees, even the people you're leading. It makes a difference in their lives. Because I'll tell you this one thing. The book that I wrote, Life Above and Beyond the Rim, became a bestseller. It became a bestseller because my mission, not because I'm someone special. It because the discoveries that I made through my journey, from the impacts that happened through other people, the mentors that I've had, Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson, even Barkley, okay? You hear about my story with the Bulls. Well, guess what? My next team that I played for was the Phoenix Suns. And if you guys remember 1992-93, okay, actually 93-94, we actually beat the Phoenix Suns, right? So Barkley wasn't very happy when I showed up in the locker room. So I walk into the locker room and Charles Barkley is standing there and he looks at me and he had no idea that Michael Jordan had called the office and said, hey, Joe Courtney will watch after Charles Barkley and keep him out of trouble. I had no idea this either, right? I found out the hard way. Barkley looked at me and says, you got to be kidding me. And I go, hey man, I come in peace. I'm here to help. And Charles said, man, I got to call Michael about this, man. He can't be bringing over here to hurt our team. I said, no, I'm here to help. So Charles Barkley and I, at that moment, became locked at the hip. Then they brought me in the office and they said, Joe, we've got good news and bad news. And I go, good news and bad news. What could be bad about playing in the NBA? Well, the good news is we're going to sign you to a deal. I go, yes. What's bad? He goes, well, the bad news is you got to keep Barkley out of trouble. I go, is that even possible? Are you kidding me? Right? And so from that point on, Charles and I were locked at the hip. And what's amazing about that is I learned another type of leadership. I learned someone who worked their tail off. Now, Barkley had a lot of fun. So when I was with the Bulls, I learned a lot of things, how to do a lot of things right. When I met Barkley, let's just put it this way, I learned a lot of other things. But what I got from Barkley, and everybody in here would agree that Barkley's one of the greatest players to ever played, correct? But he had a different leadership style. So even Charles Barkley had an opportunity, I had an opportunity to learn something from. The guy worked hard, but he worked hard behind the scenes. He made you think that he wasn't working. Barkley would call me at 3 in the morning and he'd want to go run. Believe it or not, we were both vacuuming at 3 in the morning. Odd little habit. Okay? So I get a phone call from Charles Barkley and we go jog in the middle of the night. Barkley would work out and train when nobody looked, whereas Jordan was all out in front of you. Then when Barkley had played the game, Barkley played the game with vigor and zest and fun. His whole personality was based around making sure everybody knew he loved what he did and he had fun, right? Different type of leader. And then I move on. I go and I get a chance to play with San Antonio Spurs. I get a chance to play with some of the other teams that are great teams. And all of these little bits and pieces are things that I gathered. So if one day I finally started my own company, my own business. But here's the interesting thing I want to tell you. When it was time for me to start my own business, I went from an observer to a critic in action. Why? Because even though I'd had a lot of experiences, even though I was trained by some of the best, when it came to my life, my world, my family, I needed to make sure that I used the best of everything that I've learned. Would you guys agree with that? I mean, you can hear stuff from a lot of people, but when it comes time for you to feed your family, when it comes time for you to have an impact on this world, one way or another, you need to go with the best information. So when I went through reflection, as you guys see on the screen, I looked through all of these teams that I played with, okay? All of the different teams I played with, all the great players and everything that I had to learn from all of these great players. And there were some common denominators with them, right? Obviously, they're all great. Obviously, they had different styles of leadership. But then the one thing that mattered was who won it all. Who was the true champion? And what set them apart? As you look at, companies and organizations out there, it's pretty clear companies that exceed, right? And they all kind of have a similarity within them. So the Chicago Bulls was that championship team. So I had to go back and say, what was it about them that made them win, made them great? And what was it about them that other companies and organizations that are great, what's the similarity? What's the comparison? And here's what I found. I found that the next most important thing that I needed to learn about leadership was understanding the difference of why people succeed. And why people succeed in numbers. And that key common denominator within professional sports on a high level and companies on a high level that perform well is culture. It's culture. It's the culture that exists. It's the unspoken state of being that exists when you're not there. From a leadership standpoint, how cool would it be for you guys to be all doing your thing and, be somewhere else and everything would just happen for you? Would that be cool? Everybody, your teams and every part of the organization was just thriving. That'd be awesome, wouldn't it? Well, trust me, that's not the common thing that happens. The reason why is because most companies don't focus on culture. See, the old way of doing business was focusing on yesterday's problems. Meaning they look at the old things that happened. What did we do wrong yesterday? Or, what's happening here that we need to fix, which is not a bad thing. But the new companies, the difference between that situation was the new companies that master culture, they work on one key thing that's totally different. And that is they focus on solving tomorrow's problems. Right? They focus on the future. And when you take yourself and you go from a reverse standpoint of the past and you start working on focusing on the future, now there's certain things that you can be enlightened and that could cause a true transformation. That causes true transformation. And there are steps to having a great culture. So you look back in the Bulls and I'm thinking about it. Well, when I played for the Boston, or when I played for Milwaukee Bucks, for instance, right? I would, be playing and practice and having a good practice and, okay, coach, I need to work more and everything else, right? Now, this was after the Chicago Bulls. Well, then I get out there shooting jump shots, man, and, working on, practice is over. And all of a sudden, guy would come up to me and say, hey, the gym's about to close, or you need to get out of here. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, can I just stay a little bit longer and work on my game? No, we got to close down right now. Time's up. They kicked me out of the gym. But yet in the Chicago Bulls organization, I wasn't the only one staying there. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, all of them would stay voluntarily to work on their game. And the leaders of the staff that was around would stay there with us because we're all improving. We're all trying to work to get better. And matter of fact, they would get out there, some of the coaches would stay. Okay, when they could just leave and go home, they would actually stay and help promote us getting better. They took a vested interest. Why? Because the culture that we had superseded any of us. The culture superseded any of us. And that's what you need to start with first. So there's a quote that I want you to hear, and it's victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. How many of you guys have heard of that quote before? Pretty powerful, isn't it? What does that mean to you guys? That means that preparation and understanding of where you're trying to go is so key. It's so important. It's so important for you to understand where you're trying to go so that you can create an environment, to create the culture that you want to create.